All right, people, I'm what you need. And I'm going to show you guys something because I think a lot of people don't realize how long it takes for fights to happen. And a lot of fans think that, fights just happen like that, especially big fights. That's crazy. Sorry about that, people. I'm trying to do multiple things at once. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to talk about big fights and them happening and what you need in the building. How's everybody doing? I hope you guys are enjoying videos. Like, share, subscribe as you see necessary. This is me, uncut, and just me. All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about is the fact that a lot of people, always feel that these tremendously big fights just happen out of the clear blue sky. And I'm going to show you, give you a set of examples where that's just not the case. Let's start with the great Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard was supposed to face Marvin Hagler in 1982. Okay, in 1982, after he had beaten Thomas Hearns at avenge his loss against Roberto Duran, he fought Bruce Finch, knocked him out in 3 rounds, and then he had this press conference where he invited Marvin Hagler, marvelous Marvin Hagler, a number of dignitaries into the press conference to hear him speak. And in that press conference, now he was preparing to face Roger Stafford, and he's got some floaters in his eyes. He was seeing these floaters things. He went to the doctor, and the doctor said he had detached retina, and he repaired the detached retina. So this happened, and this made news. And Leonard actually wanted to face marvelous Marvin Hagler, so he invited him to this press conference where he announced that he was retiring from boxing, not because of his retina, but because he didn't have the zeal to face boxers anymore. So this was the first time a fight with Marvin Hagler had made news. Actually, it was happening even while Leonard was fighting at welterweight. This anticipated clash actually came to be. Excuse me. So anyway, I really should comb my hair. Probably should comb my hair for the video. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna have a little fun with you guys. So, Sugar Ray Leonard, that was the first time formally we were hearing of him, actually having indication of wanting to face Marvin Hagler. And of course, this festered over time. Came back into boxing in '84. I was talking about facing, Donald Curry and Milton McCroy and all these guys. He was talking about that. Excuse me. And of course, Sugar Ray Leonard faced Kevin Howard, and he didn't like how he looked. He got knocked down in that fight against Kevin Howard, and so he retired from boxing once again. And he stayed out of boxing while, all the welterweights were doing well and prospering, and they were fighting amongst themselves. And, Marvin Hagler had faced Duran, he had faced Thomas Hearns. But after the Mugabe fight, Leonard thought that he'd seen Hagler slow down, and so he announced a fight with Marvin Hagler in 1986 and faced Marvin Hagler in 1987. As we all know, the amount of rounds and so on that happened in the fight, Leonard sort of dictated some of that. Okay, so that fight took 5 years to make. Okay? All right. Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson. Lennox Lewis called out Mike Tyson in 1996. This is after Mike Tyson had beaten the British boxer, whose names for some reason just kind of slipped my mind. The British WBC heavyweight champion of the world. He beat him. He had faced him before. And his second time facing him, he knocked him out again. His name will come to me. Daniel Dubois' mentor is the guy I'm talking about. Everybody knows him. He's well known in Great Britain. I just can't remember his name. Anyway, when Mike Tyson beat that gentleman, Lennox Lewis called him out because he was actually the mandatory Mike Tyson, and with the one who the WBC ordered to Mike Tyson to face. Mike Tyson decided not to face Lennox Lewis in 1996. He was stripped of the WBC title. Lennox Lewis fought for the WBC title. In his next fight, where Mike Tyson went on to face Bruce Seldon in the same year, 1996, for the WBA title, and he beat Bruce Seldon, stopping him, I think, in 3 rounds to get the WBA title. Mike Tyson would go on to face Evander Holyfield, much smaller guy, and lose to him twice. And then he would go on a series of other fights, building up his resume, while Lennox Lewis was dominating, became undisputed champion, went on to lose to Racine Hochman, come back, and then Lennox Lewis was able to face Mike Tyson in 2002. 6 years after he had initially called him out and was in a position to face him. And mind you, Mike Tyson actually ducked Lennox Lewis. Like he was stripped of his title. And so we all know who ducked who. Another very good example, and there are so many. But let's talk about Mayweather versus Pacquiao. Mayweather versus Pacquiao was supposed to happen in 2010. Mayweather came out of retirement, faced Juan Manuel Marquez, and then there was negotiations on foot in 2010, beginning of 2010, for Mayweather to face Pacquiao. What eventually happened is that Manny Pacquiao left the negotiations because he did not agree to the independent anti-doping test from USADA at the time. So that's why the negotiations broke down. And as such, Pacquiao went on to face other opponents. Mayweather went on to face other opponents. Now, I want you to see something. Manny Pacquiao ended up getting knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez. He also was beaten by Timothy Bradley. And all of a sudden, all of that, attitude that he had, where he was just rejecting Mayweather's offers as the offer he made in 2012, all of a sudden his attitude changed because he was no longer the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He had lost twice. He was now the B-side. Now he needed Mayweather to have that mega fight. And Pacquiao's attitude changed somewhat. And so it was in 2015 where Pacquiao accepted the same negotiation that Mayweather had given him in 2010. He actually accepted the independent anti-doping drug testing, the Olympic-style drug testing, that Manny Pacquiao actually had to fight. And they fought in 2015. Exactly 5 years after they initially were supposed to fight. Okay? And that's in line with Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler. Leonard, the one who initially called off the idea of the fight, with Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis. Mike Tyson was the one that actually ducked Lennox Lewis. With Mayweather versus Pacquiao, Pacquiao was the one that ducked Mayweather initially. And I'm going to give you now Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. So after Terence Crawford became the undisputed super lightweight or junior welterweight champion of the world by beating Julius Indongo, he called out Errol Spence. Errol Spence had just become the IBF welterweight champion of the world by beating Kell Brooks. So he was the number 1 welterweight in the world because he beat the number 1 welterweight in the world, was Kell Brooks. Whereas Terence Crawford was the number 1 super lightweight in the world, undisputed. And so Terence Crawford called out Errol Spence. This was in 2017. Now, 3 years later, Terence Crawford is still calling out Errol Spence Jr. And a lot of people don't realize these mega fights, these big fights. What happens with a lot of these fights is the big names try to get as much money out of them as they can. They adjust for position. Now remember, Terence Crawford's the one that called out Errol Spence. Errol Spence told Terrence Crawford, I'm going to beat all of these welterweights on my side of the fence. I'm going to beat all the world champions, get all the belts. Then I'm going to come across and face you. Errol Spence obviously got in an accident in between, but it's been 3 years since. Now, I think that by about 4 to almost 5 years, which is how these fights go, by then, Terrence Crawford will have faced Errol Spence Jr. This is the nature of boxing. So either in 2021, which I think it will happen at the end of 2021, if Errol Spence gets Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford will have to go ahead and try and face maybe Sean Porter. Manny Pacquiao will, in the interim, face probably Mikey Garcia next year, and then he'll face Terrence Crawford. He'll face Errol Spence, and I think that Terrence Crawford will face Sean Porter, and then at the end of the year, I believe if they are both successful, that's a big if. But let's say they're both successful and they win their fights, then we are looking at Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Terrence Crawford will be 34 years of age. He's just out of his prime, for those people who like that, prime years, between 25, 26 to 33 years. Be outside of his prime years, but he's really still in his prime. Okay. Has almost no wear and tear in his body. Errol will be 31 years old. And if they fight at the end, just like how they fought here in November of 2021, I do believe that will be about 4 years since Terrence Crawford called out Errol Spence, which would be in line with how big fights happen. They take time to happen. And for some reason, the fans never get it. The fans just never get it. So that is a mega fight. And generally speaking, mega fights take about 4, 5 to 6 years to happen. Real mega fights, okay? Against real guys. Because the boxing scientists, what's up, man? Because what happens is, and a lot of people just never understand this concept, it takes the fighters a while to get the contractual arrangements down packed. All right. Sometimes also a fighter is ducking another fighter, no doubt about it. But the fact that they ultimately face each other has to do with egos and how big the share of money is to make those big fights happen. Because when you have two guys who are used to being A side, it's very hard for these fighters to face each other unless a fighter is needs the other fighter to make substantially more money. But usually egos get into the play. All right. You look at Pacquiao. Pacquiao didn't need Mayweather. He was pound for pound number 1 in the world. You know when Pacquiao needed Mayweather and he started speaking about it? He seriously needed him when he lost. He lost twice. And then he was really serious about it. Because when the opportunity presented itself the second time around and there was still a demand for the fight, Pacquiao jumped at it. But it still took a lot of pushing. And it actually took Mayweather to actually confront him for that to actually tilt over the edge. Tyson versus Lennox Lewis was the biggest thing ever. Even after the fact that 6 years had passed since Lennox Lewis called out Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson was on the upbeat. He was on the upswing. He was beating people. And that's just the way how those things are. It always comes down to money, especially when the other guy, he realizes he's at the end of the line. The ducker especially. They tend to make the fight then. Now, in this case, Errol Spence is the younger guy. Terrence Crawford is the older guy. I'm hearing a lot of people say, I even heard Blue Blood Sports TV say, that he thinks this fight reminds him of Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns in terms of the magnitude of the fight. He also says in terms of the skills of the boxers, that they're highly skilled boxers and they're guys that get people out of there. Shout out to the boxing scientist. He says, Errol is ducking Bud. I do not share your opinion, but that is one you are entitled to. He also says, Bud confronted Errol and said he will take the Mikey Garcia first. But 3 fights later, he still hasn't fought Bud yet. Well, that is not what Errol said to Bud the first time they met each other. Errol said that he's going to beat all the champions on his side of the uh, of the line. Okay, he said he was going to go through and beat Mikey Garcia, then go through Sean Porter, get him out the way. Then he wants to get Pacquiao. Was it Pacquiao? I don't think he said Pacquiao. I think he said Thurman. I think it was Thurman because Thurman was the champ at the time. He said he wanted to get rid of those guys. And so he wanted to beat all the guys on his side of the court because, as he said, they're easy fights to make. And he said it right in front of Bob Arum. He said, Bob Arum ain't don't want this fight. He said it in front of Bob Arum. He said Bob Arum's in the way of getting to do this fight. Bob Arum won this fight. And look what Bob Arum's doing to Terrence Crawford. So that's what I remember. And you can always pull up the YouTube clip with Errol Spence talking. And at the time, Errol Spence was saying, Terrence, man, you too small. You too small. And I thought the same thing. But now, Terrence is not too small anymore. He's not. He's good size. He's a full-fledged welterweight now. And I think he's ready. So I'm looking forward to that fight next year. As soon as possible. So if they wanted to make that fight next, that would be cool. If they want to make that fight at the end of next year, that's cool too. Errol's going to be fighting, he said, in the summer, July of 2021. And if it ain't named Pacquiao, it better be Bud. I'm going to excuse him if he wants to face a 42-year-old Manny Pacquiao, which, in my opinion, I'm going to be honest with you. Manny Pacquiao's incredible and everything, but he got hurt real bad by Keith Thurman. Real. And Errol Spence would just finish the job that Keith Thurman did not finish. I think Errol Spence will smash Manny Pacquiao, but not in the way how people think. I'm thinking Pacquiao does his thing. Errol gets used to Pacquiao. And somewhere in the middle to late rounds, that's when the smashing really begins. I think Pacquiao took a lot of punishment in the middle to the late rounds with Keith Thurman. I looked how they were holding him, like how they held Adrian Broner coming out of Adrian Broner's fight with Marcos Maidana. It's the same kind of thing. And Pacquiao kept on saying over and over that Keith Thurman hits hard. That's all he kept on saying. I didn't like that. He won the fight, but he took a hell of a lot of punishment in that fight against Keith Thurman. So, Pacquiao was like, he hits hard like Margarito. He was saying that shit over and over. I don't know, man. I don't have a nice feeling about Pacquiao facing Errol Spence. And he could take steroids, whatever. It's still your nervous system is still your nervous system. He gonna take a pounding. Errol does not hit soft. Okay. Errol doesn't hit soft. He may not hit like Keith Thurman. He may not hit like Danny Garcia, but he don't hit soft. And that's detrimental, Pacquiao might win that fight against Errol. I never count Pacquiao out. I don't think he would, but my thing with that is the kind of damage he's going to take, because Errol's more surgical than Keith Thurman is. He's much more surgical, much more defensively responsible, much better boxer than Keith Thurman is. It goes without saying. So I don't know. Boxing Scientist says Bud is a much better boxer than Errol. Errol is just stronger. I don't know about that, buddy. I don't know. They have their strengths. Errol can do it all. He can fight on the inside. He can fight at mid-range. He did that with Mikey Garcia. He fought at mid-range. I'm Danny Garcia, sorry. He fought at mid-range. He fought on the inside, and he fought on the outside. And he countered Danny Garcia's counters. And he did get hit with some shots by Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia, of course, couldn't let his hands go like he wanted to because we already know the blueprint to beat Danny Garcia. What is it? A good jab, right? A good jab. So we knew that from Mauricio Herrera. Y'all remember that fight in Puerto Rico? You remember that fight? A boxing scientist? Good jab. That's Danny Garcia's Achilles heel. So I think that's Errol Spence knew that, and he just simply implemented that, and he did whatever he wanted to some degree. Very, very sharp boxer. His footwork and he doesn't have flat feet. He comes in and out, or he can stay on the inside and work you. The interesting thing was Danny was so skilled at rolling those punches. He was rolling it and riding them very well. And he himself had decent pivot work. I mean, to be honest with you, Danny did a very good job against Errol Spence. When I rewatched the fight, he did a pretty good job going to the body. The problem is Danny wasn't doing enough. It wasn't that he wasn't doing it. I saw him hesitate at certain points in time where he slipped the punch. He's in position to throw the left hook, and he just doesn't throw it. Like, he was kind of hesitant all the way through. And I think it's because his mind's not programmed, and his style was never programmed. He never was programmed to be ultra aggressive. His thing is countering. And to come out of that mode, for some reason, he just couldn't do it. Especially when Errol disrupted him with the jab. When he hit him with the jab, boop, disrupted him. He'd freeze up and go defensive. And he's slick defensively, don't get me wrong. He rolled a lot of those punches, rolled a lot of punches and rolled a lot of punches, but he had the beautiful Philly shell, he had the high guard, he had various things. He's very skilled. The pivot work was on point. He doesn't move around a lot in the ring, but he has very precise footwork. He was getting to Errol, but it was hard because Errol's jab was always in his face. But he did good. I mean, especially in the later rounds, he did pretty well. But Errol was doing all kinds of things. I mean, he showcased quite a lot of stuff, showing how much versatility he has. I could break that down for you guys another time. But my point is that this fight with Terrence Crawford, it's obviously going to take a while to happen because, one, Errol says 60-40 split. He says, brother, let's see if we can make something happen. KP from KC. Errol's growing as a fighter. I don't know about growing. He always had the stuff that he had. It's just we are getting to see more of him. And I honestly speaking, me personally, I thought he was sharper than I'd ever seen him before. And as a fighter, as Sean Porter said, if you're not growing in this sport, you should get out of it. You're supposed to grow. You're supposed to get better and better, like fine wine, right? Canelo, he gets better and better every performance we see from him. Better and better, right? Mayweather, every time we saw him, he got better and better. Pacquiao, every time we saw Pacquiao, he got better and better. He's supposed to, So the fact that they can't even agree on a split, Errol with Bud, because Bud on the ESPN side, he went to ESPN Plus. ESPN Plus was created for Bud. Bud was supposedly the A side in every negotiation. He's the guy doing the offering. That's not going to happen this time around because he does. Bob Arum said it. Bud been losing the money. You can't be an A side. You can't be the main attraction and you're losing people money. You're not the A side. The A side has to do with drawing power. I will bring your attention back once again to Mayweather versus Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya was the A side in that fight. He determined the weight class they fought at. He determined the gloves. He determined everything. Mayweather was pound for pound the number one fighter in the world. And yet, Oscar called the shots because people came to see Oscar. They didn't come to see Floyd. They came to see Oscar, the drawing power. The one who was the cash cow, as we call him, was Oscar De La Hoya. The cash cow in this case is not Terrence Crawford, because financially speaking, Bob Arum stopped doing pay-per-view with Terrence Crawford because Terrence Crawford is not having good pay-per-view numbers. He's not having good pay-per-view buys. They're abysmal. He hasn't cracked 200,000 pay-per-view buys as yet. He's yet to do that. Errol Spence has more than cracked 3,000 pay-per-view buys. The highest being 400,000 pay-per-view buys he's had with the Shawn Porter fight, surprisingly. Okay, and if he does face Manny Pacquiao next, he is undisputably the A side, because we all know Manny Pacquiao does numbers of 500,000 pay-per-view buys and up. So it really is in no way, shape, or form a split with pay-per-view where Terrence Crawford is going to be the A side or an equal. He's not. It just is what it is. I'm not trying to be an Errol Spence fan or a Terrence Crawford fan. I'm just telling you the reality of the situation. But the egos of guys makes it hard to negotiate these things. And Errol knew this. That's why Errol was facing guys where negotiating of deals is very easy, because what you're going to have to deal with is the following: ESPN, Fox, or Showtime, and the top ranked promotions, where Bob Arum is not willing to put out money to pay people to face Bud. And he said so. This is just a reality you have to deal with, whether you like it or not. This is not Errol ducking Bud. Errol's not ducking nobody. He proved it by facing Danny Garcia as his first fight coming out of an accident. If he was afraid to face Bud, he'd take a tune-up. He'd be cautious. He'd be smart. He wouldn't just go in a Danny Garcia fight. Errol ain't afraid to face nobody, and we all know this. Bob Arum was the first guy to trivialize the guys on the PBC side, even though the majority of elite welterweights, and this is common sense, the elite welterweights on the PBC side were all on the PBC side. And then they conjured up this tremendous idea that PBC fighters were afraid to face Bud, right? What's the grounds? Well, other PBC fighters faced Bud. Yeah, of course they did, because they were B-level fighters and C-level fighters. They didn't call the shots. But when you've got a guy like Keith Thurman who's faced Shawn Porter, Manny Pacquiao, Danny Garcia, okay? He's been making upwards of $8 million a fight. In the front end, for the Pacquiao fight, he made $8 million. Now you're going to tell me you're going to offer him what? $4 million? What, we go backwards as a career continues? We take pay cuts as our career continues? No. Not even Teofimo Lopez was willing to accept a pay cut for his fight against Vasily Lomachenko, because the fighters are not stupid. You're not going to exploit them today. You could have done that in the past, but not today. That's why the Ryan Garcias of the world, they call him a diva. Ryan's doing the right thing. As Teddy Atlas said, you can't pay fighters enough, because the lion's share of the money is usually gotten by the promoters and managers, and the fighters get the breadcrumbs. So they're supposed to fight for their pay. It's prize fighting, and the guys who actually do the fighting should get the prize, not pieces of the prize. And what a lot of you modern day you fans today say, oh, well, you know, back in the day, guys used to call each other out and want to face each other. That's because they were stupid. Let's be real. Because when the real alpha males started to clash each other, it took years for those fights to happen. And y'all know this. Why? Because they're hashing out details. Who's the A side? Who makes the lion's share of the money? Because guess what? You're just a fan. It's their careers. They got no insurance or social security to stand back, fall back on. So obviously, in this game, you make as much money as you can and get out of there. But it just doesn't make logical sense what you guys who claim you support Crawford say. You guys are saying, with Crawford, it's a 50-50 fight. On what level, my friend? On what level? We must be realistic here. Is Crawford an exciting fighter? I think so. But is it translating into pay-per-view buys? No. Because the guys who are promoting him, Floyd Mayweather even said this, Crawford shouldn't even be with Bob Arum. That's the mistake he made. Top Rank was great for Crawford up to the point where it was developing his career. But where he's supposed to be profiting from big, big money, and everybody said this, LDBC, everybody's been saying this. He made a fatal mistake. He should have gone across to Al Heyman and the PBC. People are like, well, it's not guaranteed he gets any fights. Well, let's look at the history of the PBC then. Haven't the fighters gotten whatever they wanted from Al Heyman? Didn't Al Heyman ever deliver everything to the PBC fighters? So if Terrence Crawford went across there to Al Heyman, and trust you, this Manny Pacquiao wanted Floyd Mayweather fight, Al Heyman working on that shit. Because Al Heyman keeps his word. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So when you think, okay, that, Terrence Crawford shouldn't have gone across to the PBC. I'm not going to say what the man should or shouldn't do with his life. He's in charge. So I respect him for whatever he does. But let's be real. Al Heyman don't let fighters down, man. Al Heyman, that's one thing you know about Al. Al will try and get you to fight. He'll try his best to get you to fight that you want to get. That's the one thing Al, that's what he do. He's a manager. That's what he do. Okay? He's not a promoter. So Terrence, now I don't know what the contractual agreement with Terrence Crawford and Bob Arum is. See, what a lot of people don't understand is sometimes you sign a contract with a promoter, but you actually, it's like a slave contract in the sense that when it comes time to renew your contract, there's a stipulation or clause in there which makes it difficult for you to go elsewhere. It's like you're bonded down to this promoter. And so it's hard to get free of him. Unless you want to expend serious amount of money that the promoter thinks you're worth. So that may be the catch-22 that holds Bud down. Or it could be Todd LaBeouf. Todd LaBeouf is a good guy. He's a decent dude. And he may be the guy that Bud really vibes with. Floyd, you know why Floyd got the fight with Pacquiao? Because of Todd LaBeouf. It wasn't because of Bob Arum. Todd LaBeouf was what Floyd was good with Todd LaBeouf. Y'all don't know all of these things, but relationships, you know what I mean? So that's how he got the fight with Pacquiao. But I'm just saying, be that as it may, Crawford ain't want to take no, and that's just ego, I guess. He don't want to be no B-side. B-side have disadvantages. He don't want no B-side, you know what I'm saying? Let me listen to you guys, what you guys say. I'm going to come back on my topic because I got a lot more to say. Oh man, you guys talked a hell of a storm. Let's get into it then. Let's hear these dudes. The Boxing Science says no, Bud and Errol should be 50-50 split. Nah, sorry, bro. That's just not realistic. Bud is pound for pound the best. Absolutely, as Mayweather was with Oscar. Bud has no leverage or fights. Facts. He don't have monetary leverage, no. He don't have money. His last fight did well. It had great views, but it wasn't pay-per-view. Oscar was, and Mayweather accepted it. Yes, you have to, man. You have to become the top dog. You got to beat the top dog. So everybody knows Crawford is Crawford's pound for pound number one, and Errol Spence is the number one welterweight in the world. It's just what it is. But when you beat the number one welterweight in the world and you're pound for pound number one, you know how it go down. You know how it go down. You call all the shots. All the shots. The Boxing Insider says Bob wasn't doing his job. Bob doesn't promote like he should. Well, he don't know how to promote fighters like Bud. He don't know how to do it. And Mayweather knew that from a long time ago. And Bud's beginning to realize that too. He's starting to speak out. The fact that Bud actually showed up on Errol Spence on the PBC or Errol Spence tells y'all everything you need to know. That fight's definitely happening next year. KP from KC5 says, remember, Mosley bear Oscar, and he thought he should get much more for the rematch. Oscar said no, and Mosley went on to lose to Vernon Forrest. That's what I'm saying, man. Certain fights just never happen because, again, guys can't agree on the amount they should get paid. And Mosley beat Oscar, right? He beat Oscar, like KP from KC saying. Some people know their history, man. I'm glad. So there's a lot of big fights because you got big egos. And then on top of that, it's not just the fighters, but you have the promoters also who have big egos, and that makes a lot of problems. Now, Errol Spence has Errol Spence Promotions, as y'all saw. So he's his own promoter. Al Heyman allows fighters to do that. The extremely elite fighters, you know, they get their own promotional companies and things going and stuff like that. But Al Heyman, if you haven't realized it by now, Al Heyman is a pro fighter guy. He helps out fighters. All right? That's what he do. Okay? He's an advisor. He's a manager. He's not a promoter. Okay? But he has cut out the promoter middleman for a lot of fighters. He figured out that promoters keep fighters from having their fights. So the PBC, all the PBC fighters, they face one another easily. You know what I'm saying? When promoters have issues with each other, that's when you don't get the PBC fighters facing one another. Danny Jacobs still fighting on the zone. Right? We saw Danny Jacobs' last fight. He's still promoted by Eddie Hearn, but he's managed by Al Heyman. You get what I'm saying? Al Heyman's that kind of dude. People say Bob Arum's like that. No, Bob Arum has his affiliations. He tried to work with DAZN, but he's mostly top rank. When you look at Bob Arum, mostly top rank. He's not even working with Golden Boy that much these days. What's my point? My point is that it's all these other parties getting involved in negotiations that slows down the process of big fights happening, because you got a lot of players in there. Of course, it's all fueled by the fighters. If the fighters decide they want to fight, they're going to fight. But it doesn't just happen like that. It happens down the road. It just still doesn't happen immediately. The Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury fight. Watch this. They had the first fight, right? Deontay Wilder was the A side. He picked Tyson Fury. He didn't beat Tyson Fury. They fought to a draw, officially. I thought Tyson Fury unofficially won the fight, but that's my opinion. That's not what happened, right? The judges didn't decide it that way. What did Tyson Fury do next? Tyson Fury went and he signed with Top Rank. And I got a deal with ESPN. Big $100 million deal with ESPN, right? Which obviously is not fully paid out to him. He's got to get his whole entire work. Now, Bob Arum, Top Rank, is seen as a premier boxing company. That's the A-side company, you know. That's how Bob Arum is. He doesn't kneel to nobody, nothing. He says his own mind. He don't care. He said whatever he want to say, and everybody just had to go with it. He also circulates rumors about fighters and tarnishes their reputation and stuff. And no, he doesn't suffer any consequence for what he does. Okay, fine. Now, because Top Rank is seen as a premier boxing group and ESPN as its mouthpiece, we got guys like Shakur Stevenson who affirm that. He went and signed with Top Rank. You know, we have Teofimo Lopez who affirms that. He signed with Top Rank, right? Lomachenko, right? They got those kinds of guys. Beterbiev. Follow me on this. I'm not knocking none of these guys. I don't really know who will win the fight between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. I don't know. They're both excellent, skillful, sharp, smart fighters. So I'm not too sure who will win the fight between them. That's why I need to see it. And I would love to see it. And that's a great fight because of the fact that we don't really know who would win. And in that regard, we can call it 50-50. Right? We can call it a 50-50 fight. Not in terms of money, but in terms of matching up. Some of y'all have convinced Errol Spence, man, he would butcher Terrence Crawford. I'm like, butcher? That's a bit excessive. And those of you who believe Terrence Crawford would not, man, he walked Errol Spence down, he butcher him. I don't believe that either. I'm just being honest with you, right? I got to see it to know. And it's a great fight for that reason. Now, let me see what you guys are saying before I go on. Boxing Side says Bub wasn't doing his job. Bub doesn't promote like he should. Yeah, well, 2020 is hindsight, man. KP from KC says, remember? Okay, we got that already. Boxing Side says Errol has better promotions. Well, he promotes himself. He promotes himself. He has his own little promotional company now. That is true. The Boxing Scientist says Bub lies a lot. Duh. That's old news, bro. KP from KC5. That's true. That's very true, by the way, Boxing Scientist. KP from KC says it's facts. KP from KC says that's Crawford's fault. He did knowing who Bob is and what Bob does. Well, it is what it is, I guess. The Boxing Scientist says Bob is an old racist. Bob lost more money with Loma than he did with Bud. Bob never called out Loma like that. Okay, then. Now you talking. In fact, ESPN used to promote Loma like it was the next, the second coming. But it is what it is. It is what it is. Bub asked Bud to take a pay cut, but never asked Loma to take a pay cut. Bud lost money on Loma. And Bud ain't taking no pay cut. Bud accomplished more than Errol. In terms of weight classes, I agree with you, Boxing Scientist. But in terms of competition, I think Errol has faced much better competition than Terrence Crawford has. I'll give you two reasons why I say that, okay? The first one is weight class. When you go up in weight, they're bigger, they're heavier, they're stronger, and they punch harder. All those guys that Errol Spence faced, from Mikey Garcia, Danny Garcia, and Sean Porter, have never been knocked out. Never. Never. They've never been stopped. That's one. Two, those three guys I just mentioned, Mikey, Sean, and Danny, have all been world champions in multiple weight classes, or multiple times. Should I say multiple times? All right. Danny has beaten Crawford in the amateurs. Crawford has a lot of respect for Danny. Okay? Crawford realized that the jab is what is used to disrupt Danny. But Danny just need to work on a couple things, and he'll be back in the game. It's small things, as my great mentor, Barry Robinson, would say, small things, all things. And it's just these little small things that Danny does. See, that's why he should have rematched Mauricio Herrera. He'd have gotten that fine-tuning to be able to deal with the Errol Spence. But he didn't, so it is what it is. So he's got a gap in his game he has to work on. But it's small things, all things. He can get it put together. Those three names were multiple world champions. And on top of that, those three names I just mentioned, two of them were welterweight world champions. One multiple times, and the other one was a WBC world champion. See, I'm talking about former champions facing each other and also facing Errol Spence. When you face guys of that kind of caliber, at that kind of level, in that kind of weight class, they take precedence over any guy that Terrence Crawford faced. I mean, the best guys that Terrence Crawford faced in his entire career are Kell Brook, right? And this is a Kell Brook who's not a top 10 welterweight anymore, but damn good. And he dispatched of Kell Brook in a way that Kell Brook was not expecting. And just showing that Kell Brook wasn't on the level, and it's at the moment. Let me just say that. He wasn't on the level at the moment when he faced Terrence Crawford as Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, or or Sean Porter. Okay. No knock on Kell Brook. He just wasn't prepared for that particular moment and that particular shot at that particular time. But when you are at the highest level, you got to be prepared for those kinds of things, right? And you could tell, and even Kell even said it. The level of sparring in America is probably a lot higher. So he never got challenged with that kind of check hook. It wasn't just a check hook, but caught him at perfect timing. Got him off balance. And Kell Brook was he was beating Terrence Crawford's ass now. He was the guy that was winning the fight. He was doing his thing, got a little too aggressive, tried to throw the lead right hand. Terrence Crawford timed him perfectly. It was beautiful. So some of his best opposition was Kell Brook, who was once the number one welterweight in the world after beating Sean Porter. Once upon a time. He also beat this guy. What's his name? Okay, so I'll talk about Yorkers Gamboa. Was a multiple world champion in the lower classes. Was a secondary world champion when Terrence Crawford faced him. And then the other guy I'm thinking about, which he is the Scottish kid. He went across to Scotland to beat him. The lightweight world champion. I think he was ranked number 3 in the division at the time. Adrian Broner was there, and somebody else was ranked above him. Who's the? I can't remember the kid's name. You guys know who I'm talking about. Just fill in that name for me. Those are the 3 best guys. Now you had other guys like you had a pretty good fighter in what the hell? Anyway, he was the WBC super lightweight world champion after he beat Lucas Matisse. Okay, but for some reason I can't remember his name. It just drew a blank. And then you also had Jeff Horn, which Jeff Horn. Should I really mention Jeff Horn? Like he's kind of which of these things that does not belong there. You guys know who I'm talking about though, with super lightweight WBC world champion, right? That kid, forgot his name. And he's been a contender. Faced world champions a couple times since then. He has not won the title again, but he's been, contender. It just came to me. Victor Postol. That's the name. Victor Postol. Good fighter. Good fighter. Victor Postol is a good, solid fighter. I don't think Jeff Horn belongs in that equation, but whatever. He's an awkward fighter. Let's put it that way. So I believe that that kind of competition is not better than a Danny Garcia, who's a proven track record of beating, world champions, former world champions, and, just high caliber guys. He had a diet of high caliber guys nonstop. Victor Postol has come up short against high caliber guys, right? So I don't think that Terrence Crawford's competition is better than Errol Spence's competition, especially Terrence Crawford's best competition versus Errol Spence's best competition. The best competition Terrence Crawford has dealt with today is Kell Brook. Not even Yorkers Gamboa. Kell Brook. And Kell Brook's not even a top 10 welterweight. Or top 7. Let's say top 7. So I think that Errol Spence has faced better competition than Terrence Crawford for sure. Which is why Terrence Crawford doesn't have big pay-per-view. If he had a big challenge in front of him, he'd probably have a big pay-per-view fight. He fought an Amir Khan who just got knocked out by Canelo. It's kind of. We all know Amir Khan's not a top 10 welterweight anymore. He never was for a while. He just wasn't. Ricky Burns, that's the name, man. Ricky Burns. So did Bud accomplish more than Errol Spence in terms of weight classes? Absolutely, going up in weight. It's a different weight classes, different weights. Of course, he accomplished quite a lot, and then he was undisputed. So yeah, of course, Bud accomplished more in that regard. But in terms of level of opposition, no, he hasn't. now. I mean, you got to give him his props for coming up from lightweight all the way up to welterweight. That's huge. But no, I don't think he's accomplished more than Errol Spence. I would say they're about the same when you take into consideration the weight classes and everything. It's about the same, which is what makes this fight so interesting. Hey, you guys should be really eager to see it because there's a lot of things that match up. Hmm. Boxing Insider says you tell Mayweather that accomplishments don't equal pay. No, it's not quite the same though. It's not quite the same. See, when you boil down accomplishments, all right? Yes, you do take into consideration weight class and the person going up in weight, where they came from. And of course, absolutely, 100%. But the thing about it is, when you go up in weight class, who are you facing? Right? Are you facing the absolute best in that weight class or close to it? How are you performing against them? When we're talking about accomplishments, of course, weight class plays a role. But let's think about it. Ricky Burns is the guy I was talking about. Two-time world champion. He had been a world champion at lightweight. I think he was a world champion again at lightweight. I think he's three-time world champion. And then he went up to super lightweight, and I believe he didn't become a world champion, but he became a secondary world champion, which is huge. Ricky Burns is not, he exceeded his talent. He exceeded his ability. And he did some things which were great. So Ricky Burns is a solid guy that Terrence Crawford beat in Ricky Burns' territory. So you got to give Terrence Crawford massive props for that. Even though Ricky Burns was coming off a broken jaw from Ray Beltran breaking his jaw, but But when we talk about hold on a second. Let me turn on the lights here. When we talk about Terrence Crawford versus another multiple weight world champion was I think featherweight and super featherweight world champion Yuriorkis Gamboa, right? Great world champion. Had a minor. He had a secondary welterweight championship title. And the thing about it is that when you think about what Terrence Crawford did, it was great. It was great. I mean, but he hasn't really faced guys on the level of a Danny Garcia. And he will tell you that because he knows Danny Garcia from the amateurs. He's followed his career in the pros. So he knows very well what Danny Garcia brings to the table. And he can tell you Danny Garcia is a highly respected, fighter in his opinion. Right? Danny Garcia is a very smart fighter. And very good defensively and otherwise. So Terrence Crawford will tell you, that's a good fight he would have with Danny Garcia. Because we all know Danny Garcia is tough. He's strong, Mayweather was different in that, okay. So Mayweather fought some guys in the lower weight classes. But you look at his lower weight classes accomplishments and you look at his welterweight accomplishments, and it's, everybody talks about how, he didn't face tough fights at welterweight and he picked and choose them. Actually, that's the opposite. Actually, at welterweight, he faced his toughest competition. At welterweight and super welterweight, mind you. And actually, this is where, as much people talk about, which is funny to hear, but mainly because he was the A side, they say he cherry picked his opponents. When in fact, it's the other way around. It's one of the weirdest things in the world when you're so dominant and people expect so much from you. They make these allegations because they have nothing else they can say. So they say he cherry picked his opponents, which is not true. It's It's one of the saddest things in the world. And even to this day, I listen to some boxing channels and they talk about how Mayweather's latter career, which is when he wasn't with Bob Arum, mind you, um, he cherry picked and, that was the easiest career. And I'm like, that was his toughest competition. His toughest competition was in his latter part of his career. And what people don't realize is he actually was decaying as a fighter and holding it together just long enough to beat that competition. He faced some ridiculous competition in the latter part of his career, much tougher competition than when he was facing in the beginning of his career. So I found that very interesting. That people actually say the opposite of the truth is what it is. So really, his reputation was gotten at welterweight. He really built his reputation and his credence at welterweight. After he faced Oscar, that's when he really started getting the big names because he was making the big money. Those guys didn't want to face him before that. You didn't hear Ricky Hatton calling out Mayweather at 140. He wasn't calling him out. He's going the opposite direction. Suddenly, Ricky Hatton's calling out Mayweather. Right? Because what? He became pound for pound number one, and he was the cash cow. He had the killer combination. That's rare. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen every day. And all of a sudden, everybody was calling out Mayweather. We had people weight classes way above him. We had guys like people asking Bernard Hopkins some crazy ass questions. We had Gennady Golovkin, a middleweight, calling him out, right? So I mean, everybody was calling him out all of a sudden because he had that powerful 1-2 combination. He was the cash cow, and he was also the number one fighter in the world. So anybody who actually beat him would get that 1-2 punch combination. You can't beat that. So everybody was going to call him out because everybody wanted that money. They said, look, that's what they called it, the Mayweather sweepstakes. But people got so caught up in the money, they didn't realize Mayweather was actually facing sterling competition. You think about it. He was facing very, very tough competition, but he just made it look easy. That's not the case with Terrence Crawford. He's at welterweight, his most recent peak weight, and he's not facing the best competition out there. And we all know this. Now we know the reasons why some of that is happening, right? But it doesn't mean that the reality situation is he's just not doing that. He's facing fringe guys. He's facing guys. Hold on a second. Hello? Hello? Yeah? Oh. Hold on a second.
Oh, you on the phone?
Yeah. What?
Alright, now I just tell you, let me take a walk on what I walk there now.
What work is that again? The building? The tree?
No, the tree, go around there now.
All right. Let me wrap it up. Yeah, so like I was saying, so these are things that people they don't get. And see, when you go up in weight class, because the hottest division is the welterweight division. Terrence Crawford was never in a hot division, right? He's in good divisions, solid divisions, but he never was in a hot division. The hottest division in boxing right now is the welterweight division. Everybody know that, right? So now the hottest fighters, the best fighters, arguably in the world, are welterweights, and Terrence Crawford is one of them. So that's why, again, I'm just making the case. Errol Spence has faced better competition than Terrence Crawford has faced in his career. Much better competition than Terrence Crawford has faced so far. And the fact that he might get Manny Pacquiao, arguably one of the greatest fighters ever, right? It's just gonna make it solidified that he's faced better competition than Terrence Crawford. Because Terrence Crawford has not faced a Manny Pacquiao, period. Yes, Manny Pacquiao's old and everything, but he still has never faced a Manny Pacquiao. Right? So you just can't. Come on now. KP from Casey says Mayweather is fighting a YouTuber and it will sell. Yeah, but Mayweather's living off of his legacy. So right now he's living off the fact that he He has the powerful three-punch combination that all these young fighters are trying to go after, but you don't try and go after it. You just try and win your fights. He's got this. He never relinquished being a cash cow. He never relinquished being the number one fighter in the world. And the most powerful combination. He established his TBE status. What he says is backed up. His brand is backed up by his performance and his record in the pros. So he'll always sell. It's just what it is. He'll always sell. You know, it's just what it is. As Floyd said, numbers don't lie. So he's always gonna say he could sell, and he's a smart businessman. So he understands Logan Paul has this huge YouTube base. So he's gonna fight Logan Paul to make some money off the YouTube base. And of course, Logan Paul has the opportunity of a lifetime to beat Mayweather. Nobody's done it. So blah 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 yada 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 yada. You know how it goes, right? Do I care about that fight? Absolutely not. It does not matter. It's still gonna sell. It's gonna sell whether I like it or not. You know, that's just the way how it goes. Which leads me to actually talking about another topic, but we'll talk about that some other time. I gotta go. Let me just wrap up your questions here. The boxing scientist says, why? Because Mayweather's accomplishments, it pays. Of course. But like I said before, he has damn good accomplishments at welterweight. His best weight class, his best division, where he's had the most challenging opponents, has been welterweight and super welterweight. His toughest opponents have been at welterweight and super welterweight, on paper at least. The most accomplished opponents he's ever had were at welterweight and super welterweight. That's just the truth. And case in point, Manny Pacquiao is fighting today. The guy who is going to be 42 years old and still fighting, Mayweather's faced him and beaten him. And the current guy, arguably pound for pound 1 to 3 in the world, arguably pound for pound king, Canelo Alvarez, who just beat Sergey Kovalev at 175, Mayweather beat him. That's the level of competition that Mayweather faced. There's no Canelos anywhere else in any other division that Mayweather has faced. There are no Manny Pacquiaos in any other division that Mayweather's faced. His best division was welterweight, super welterweight. Faces toughest competition there. So when people say, oh, Mayweather picked and chooses, I'm like, God damn it, that's the dumbest way to pick opponents. If I was going to pick somebody, I'd pick Devin Alexander. I'd pick Antonio Margarito, and just an anagram, just throwing punches. I wouldn't have faced Carlos Baldomir. Shit. He may be lineal champion, but he can hold that. I'll face Margarito. I don't need to face the best. I don't need to face Oscar in a whole new weight class. You know what I mean? It's just, it defies logic that they say he cherry picked. It just doesn't make no sense to me. I try to make sense of it. It doesn't make sense. Why is he trying to pick a fight with Corey Spinks? Why is he trying to pick a fight with Winky Wright? Why was Mayweather trying to do that at 140? He's fighting a 160 pounder. Why is he asking at 154, of course, but still, same thing with Corey Spinks. He was trying to make the fight with Corey Spinks. It ended up being Carlos Baldomir. He wanted to face Corey Spinks at 154 because Mayweather always knew he could top out at 154. He couldn't go beyond 154, right? See, that's what people don't know, but it is what it is. They say he cherry picked. I never understood it. I was like, man, them cherries is some rough cherries to pick, man. Why would you pick a cherry? Like people said, he chose to face Marcos Maidana over Amir Khan. And I'm like, Amir Khan didn't fight in a year. He was just sitting around waiting for Mayweather. Marcos Maidana had mowed over Adrian Broner. Marcos Maidana always hurts people in fights. It's a rough and rugged fight. Mayweather knew that going into the fight. That's not the best choice. Amir Khan is quick, yeah, okay, he's fast. But he gets knocked out. You know what I mean? And Mayweather would make adjustments to Amir Khan. But Marcos Maidana? That dude, and proved it. He proved it. Marcos Maidana's a rough and rugged guy. And he did everything. He did everything to beat Mayweather. Mayweather afterwards asked for another referee or something like that. I don't know what happened. But it was a rough and rugged fight. It wasn't no easy fight. That's a cherry pick. Come on, man. Like some of the things people say, just don't make no sense to me. But it is what it is. They say he cherry picked. I'd love to see Pacquiao versus Marcos Maidana. I'd love to see it. I just don't get it, man. These guys, man. These people. KP from KC5 says Burns. That's right. Posto. That's right. Gamboa. Yes, sir. Those are the names. And of course, you have to add Brook. Those are the best names on his resume. Boxing Scientist says Bud beat 3 Olympic gold medalists. That's great. I mean, that's great. It's just that Olympic gold medals don't mean much in pro sports, right? They don't really mean much. That was the amateurs. We're talking the pros. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you beat somebody in the amateurs, maybe you could beat them in the pros because styles make fight. But in terms of other things, not really. I mean, Gavaliauskas was an Olympic medalist or something. I don't know what he was. The African kid guy, whatever his name is, who always reached with his shots, got poor technique, and just got knocked out by a prospect. I forgot what his name is. Whatever his name is. He got beat too. It's one thing to talk about Olympic gold medalists. Nobody cares about that in the pros. You're talking the pros now. Canelo doesn't have an Olympic gold medal, but he's pound for pound up there. You know what I mean? Teofimo Lopez doesn't have a gold medal. He's pound for pound up there. You know what I mean? The Olympics is great for the amateurs. The Boxing Scientist says Bud is undisputed. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. No diggity. Nobody's saying no. But the level of competition he faced to become undisputed is nothing compared to what Errol Spence's faced. It's just not. No hard feelings. I'm just saying. KP from Casey says, who did the gold medalist beat that Bud beat? The Boxing Scientist says, do your homework. It doesn't mean anything, Boxing Scientist. You know who? I will agree with you all the way. My dude, what's his name? Troy King. Troy Killertainment. He defends Bud all the time. But for me, it's just the eye test. Bud is just skilled. He's on another level eye test wise, but he still has to be tested. Gamboa was 1. Diaz was 2. You figure out the other one. Diaz? No. Felix Diaz was cool, but he was never a world champion. He was never. He was a contender. He was a skilled little boxer. He gave Lamont Peterson some work, but he's just not. We don't talk about Felix Diaz in the same sentence with Danny Garcia. Just don't do that. Or Mikey Garcia, or who's the other guy? Sean Porter. You just don't do that. You just don't do that. That's disrespectful to them. He's a good little fighter, but he makes mistakes. How he cuts his angles and stuff. Boxing Science says Bud called out Manny long before Errol did. Absolutely true. 100%. And Bob Arum blocked that fight. Right? Bob Arum instead put Jeff Horn to face Manny Pacquiao instead of Bud. Bud was supposed to get to face Manny. 100%. I agree with you 100%. I'm not saying no. See, I'm being honest. I'm not trying to. I don't pick sides. I don't care about that. The Boxing Scientist says gold medalist, and that's good. They gold medalists. That's for the amateurs, though. That's an accomplishment. Tell me about who these guys beat in the pros. I can tell you who Danny Garcia beat in the pros because I know those guys' names. Gamboa, he beat Ponce de Leon. You know what I mean? Ricky Burns. I forgot who he beat that was worth noting, but 3-time world champion. We want to talk about world champions now. This is the pros. The top of the game's world champions. Not gold medalists. That was for the amateurs. You understand what I'm saying? So that's cool that they were gold medalists, like Gamboa and those guys. That's cool. That shows your amateur pedigree. That when you go into pro boxing, you had an advantage. But pro boxing and amateurs are two different things. You know what I mean? So you want to talk about the pinnacle of the pro boxing now. The Boxing Science says you tell Loma that. Well, first of all, Loma was a multiple world champion in multiple divisions in the pros. He proved his Olympic pedigree translated into his pro career. There are a lot of there are a lot of Olympic gold medalists that didn't do squat when it came to the pros. They were good at the amateur game, but they never adjusted to the pro game. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not disrespecting the amateur program, but we're in the pros now. So we want to talk about your accomplishments as a pro. You dig? That's what I'm trying to say, you know? And it's different. So I'm not again, I'm not Bud, like I said before, this is to me it's a 50-50 fight. I don't know who would win. Right? And Bud has shown me his ability to make adjustments, simple adjustments, but adjustments nonetheless. He has shown me that he is a fighter who is constantly problem solving, constantly looking to make adjustments to a fighter. He doesn't show me any special kind of power that people are talking about, but he is strong. And he showed that in the Gavaliauskas fight, where he just started, he was still using his defense. He was still getting hit, but he was really walking down Gavaliauskas. He said, oh, you think you a power puncher? I'm going to show you I'm stronger than you, and I'm going to beat your ass. And he realized again, the same left hook, but this time not a check left hook, just a full left hook, was catching him flush. Because Bud catches a lot of guys with the left hook. He caught this kid, Benavidez, Jose Benavidez with the left hook. He caught Felix Diaz with the left hook. He caught Yurikis Gamboa with the left hook. Sorry, right hook. My bad. He's a southpaw. Right hook. Sorry, my bad. The right hook. All right, they get open for that. He caught Kell Brook with the same thing, a check hook, a right hook, right? A shorter, quicker right hook. It was really good. You can see he was trying to work on his defense as well, but you can see he was setting up for that hook. He wouldn't intended to do it so short, but So that's Crawford. I like him. I like him a lot. I like his mentality is one of a Mayweather mentality, a continuation. Errol Spence has sparred Mayweather, again has the Mayweather mentality, sort of in terms of the thoroughness of how he does things. I think Errol is a lot more sharper as a fighter than Terrence, but Terrence is so much more plastic. What I mean by that is, he's so much more flexible than Errol is, and I would love to see those styles match up. I would like to see the battle of the jabs. I think the Terrence has a longer reach, 74-inch reach. I think that will serve him well in terms of the jabbing contest. With Errol, it depends on what angles they're cutting to make that happen. The thing with Errol cuts some really interesting angles when he's fighting you. So Errol's a tricky guy, man. He's tricky. You guys think he's just straightforward. He's not as straightforward as I told you. His pivot work is. It's the thing that makes Errol is his pivot work. How he makes those small pivots and those adjustments. It's his feet. Terrence has got a natural sort of innate ability to be flexible. What I mean by that is he can vary his timing. He can vary his speed. He can vary his body positioning. He's very flexible. He's very plastic. He makes adjustments to his entire body, not just his feet. So he'll do whatever is necessary to make adjustments to the opponent. But he can become reactionary, and that's something where if you're trying to dictate a fight, that could work against you. Because Errol's a guy who is very, very sharp. He obviously can box. But he can also stay. He's kind of like a Lomachenko in the sense that he stays just enough of the distance, or Mayweather, and he's just enough distance away from you or close to you as is necessary. And he's testing all the time range. So Errol's a guy that tests his range because he can do it. He can do it at any range. And the leverage he puts on his shots is very, very interesting. You know who he reminds me of? Jerome Ennis. Jerome Ennis is another real one we got to watch out for. Another guy from Philadelphia who's really good. He's in the low weight class, though. You got to look out for that kid. He's something else, too. Very, very sharp. I'm talking ridiculously sharp. And they got good defense. Errol has good defense. He really does. But he kind of goes more with the fundamentals. He's fundamentally sound. Terrence Crawford gives you that little extra special effects on top of the fundamentals. He does some special things, and then of course he's a switch hitter and all of that. So, but Terrence hands move independently of his legs and his torso. Like that's what I'm saying. He's plastic. It's weird to talk about Terrence because Terrence just is a totally different fighter, where he could have a different coordination for his hands while his feet's doing something different and his torso's doing something different. That's the special thing about Terrence that I find intriguing. Okay, let me wrap it up with you guys. I gotta go. Uh, the boxing scientist says Errol put a lot of mental pressure on his opponents. At times, yes, yes, yes. He's always there buzzing at you. Very busy. The boxing scientist says Errol has a chin and he's strong, but he has flaws that Bud can take advantage of. I don't think it's going to be so much flaws as it is timing. You know, how do I put this? Bud is good at. I believe Bud can set a trap for Errol. Once Errol reads the trap and he understands what it is, probably not going. He may go back to it. It depends on his training. Errol's fundamentally sound, and most of the stuff comes from his feet. It's his footwork. It's his feet. It's his pivot. I can't emphasize so much. That's going to be a problem for Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford thinks Errol's just this straight up and down guy or something like that. Errol's not that. Errol's much more deceiving than it looks, and he has not shown all his skill sets. I saw a plethora of skill sets against Danny Garcia. Errol was having fun with him, right? At a certain point in time. Errol was doing all kinds of things. He was going from the peekaboo stance to the Philly shell to the wide stance, and then he got this weird crouch. Errol got a sort of semi-wide stance, and he crouches at an angle, so it's not easy to hit him flush. And then he's very cat-like coming in and going out. He can go in and go out. Then he can just come back right in front of you and stand in front of you. He's literally frozen in front of you. You're still not going to hit him because he's at a range where when you throw the punch, it's very awkward. You're going to loop over him. Because Errol, that's the thing with, that's another thing I never really talked about with Errol. Errol can get really close to you and still throw shots at you. He's long and rangy, and yet he can just get right up on you. I don't like how. Let me show you, demonstrate a little something here. You know, like how other fighters. They throw from here, like if they're throwing that hook. Errol, literally, he's at a stance something like this, right? Kind of like this, and he's really, really low, and he leverages shots sideways like this. So he comes like that, like that. Okay, that's the thing with Errol. And he can get super low. Like he can get really, he's 5'9". He can get down to about 3 feet. That's the weird thing about Errol. He like sits into that stance. It's so awkward. So he can change levels, and his head is right in front of you. You're not going to be able to hit his head. He can go down or up underneath the shot or above the shot. He can roll under the shot and come back with another shot right in front of you. That's what's so interesting about him. So his pressure fighting is very interesting because he's boxing you while he's pressure fighting. And it looks like he can bob and weave. I've never really seen him do a lot of bob and weaving, but it looks like he can bob and weave as well. And so can Danny, but Danny just hesitates. I don't know why. He was bobbing and weaving at first, and then he just stopped. Danny can do it all. So those guys, that's what makes that fight so interesting. All right, let me see what else you guys got there. I'm gonna wrap this up. All right, so that's it. Okay, I'm gonna catch you guys later. I gotta get out of here because I gotta go deal with some business. But it was nice talking with you guys as usual. So that's why these fights take sometimes a while to get done. It has to do with egos and personalities. And just a caveat on this: Wilder versus Tyson Fury. The first fight was easy to make. The second fight was harder to make, right? But the difference is Wilder wasn't as big a guy as, say, Errol Spence doing those kinds of pay-per-view numbers, right? But even so, Wilder wanted to face Tyson Fury again, right? He really wanted to. Tyson Fury had put all this stuff, in between them, and they still had to do co-promotion with ESPN and Fox. They had to still deal with Top Rank. Wilder he was his own boss. They got by all of that, and even after they did the pay-per-views, which was pretty high, 800 something thousand pay-per-view buys, they still didn't break even. You understand what I'm saying? And that's not the number one fight they really wanted. They wanted Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. That's what everybody wanted to see. So that fight that everybody wanted to see, we had to settle for Wilder versus Fury. You know, we got the second fight, Wilder versus Fury 2. Fury won that. And we're still looking forward to the third fight. And Wilder has to actually impose a law to get to face Tyson Fury for the third fight. And they look like they're going to get it underway in 2021, which is another big fight. All right. Bear in mind this, though, that really what everybody wanted to see now is Tyson Fury versus AJ. So sometimes, you know, what you want to see as a fan is not necessarily what can happen, because one, you're dealing with businesses here and big egos, and then you're talking about guys who have obligations to other guys to face other guys, and they need to work out the details of that too. Just imagine if Wilder was pound for pound number one in the world, or he was the cash cow, how difficult that fight would have been. You know, Wilder and Anthony Joshua hasn't happened because why? Because Anthony Joshua is a big name. He has multiple world titles. He has a lot of money, and they're arguing over splitting money, and that's why they can't make the fight happen, because it's splits, and this is the way how it goes. All right, people, I'm gonna catch you guys later though. But I'm what you need. If you guys have seen boxing and understand the patterns that go on in boxing, you will understand why certain fights just don't happen as immediate as we would like them to happen. And you just have to ride it out, wait for that perfect moment when it happens. And what you do in the meantime is say, man, we want to see this fight. We want to see this fight. That's what you got to keep on saying over and over. Man, we just want to see this fight. You don't have to pick sides, but you definitely need to let them know there's a demand for it. That's the only way those things will happen. I'm what you need. I'm going to catch you guys later. I'm going to come up with another video later on tonight. Peace.